If you sat for the CSAT in 2026, you did not just walk out of a reasoning paper, you walked out of a cognitive stress test. For years, the conventional wisdom for logical reasoning preparation was simple: memorize puzzle types, learn arrangement shortcuts, master elimination techniques. Practice enough questions and the answer will eventually reveal themselves. But when you opened the 2026 paper, something felt different. The questions were not merely longer, they were architecturally different. Most candidates entered the exam hall expecting familiar reasoning templates. What they encountered instead were layered constraints, implication chains, variable clusters, spatial tracking systems, and forced logical deductions. Many students spent valuable minutes trying to eliminate options. The students who struggled kept asking, what trick should I use? The students who struggled asked, what trick should I use? The students who succeeded asked, what type of question is this? At Metis, we call these question families. And when the same family appears again and again across different questions, we call it an architecture. The distinction changed everything because the 2026 paper was not testing whether you could solve puzzles or not. It was testing whether you could identify question families. The candidates who cleared did not see separate arrangement questions, family trees, coding problems, and direction tests. They saw recurring patterns hiding beneath different surface stories. At Metis, we call these recurring question families architectures. Today, we are doing something different. That is, we are going to decode those architectures. Today, we are stripping away the surface complexity of the 2026 logical reasoning section. We are not conducting a routine answer key discussion here. We are going to expose the reasoning architecture that powered the entire paper. If you want to understand how UPSC is evolving its cognitive filters and how you must evolve your preparation for 2027, stay with me. We are starting right now the reasoning architectures of CSAT 2026. Before we discuss individual questions, let us understand something fundamental. Most aspirants walked into the exam hall believing they would face dozens of separate reasoning problems. That is not what UPSC designed. What UPSC actually tested were a small number of recurring reasoning architectures. Different questions, but same underlying systems. UPSC does not repeat questions. UPSC repeats architectures. Today we will decode 5 major reasoning architectures that dominated the 2026 paper. Think of these architectures as the examiner's toolkit. Different stories, same cognitive systems. Those are constraint, implication, relational, spatial, transformation, 5 reasoning architectures. So we are moving to first family, that is family A, that is variable cluster and constraint architectures. This is also called as questions built around restrictions. Questions where UPSC creates restrictions. Then let's look at all three questions. One looks like algebra, one looks like ranking, one looks like vehicles. But most students see three different questions. But UPSC sees one pattern underlying here. In all three questions, some positions are already fixed. Some possibilities are already blocked. The moment you identify those restrictions, the question becomes easier. The question becomes easier. Let us, we are going to discuss set A paper 2026 CSAT. Question number, please look at the question number 8, question number 33 and question number 35. At first glance, these questions appear unrelated. Please look at the questions. Set paper A. Set A paper. Look at the question number 8. One involves algebraic variables. Algebraic variables. One involves ranking constraints. One involves vehicle allocation. But structurally, they belong to the same family. All three require constraints, elimination. All three require forced assignments. All three require identifying what must be true before solving what could be true. All three require identifying what must be true, what must be true before solving what could be true. Look at the question number 8. Variable cluster isolation. It belongs to. Most aspirants start substituting variables. A system thinker notices that A plus B plus C plus D and A plus C immediately isolate B plus D. The moment B plus D becomes visible, the rest of the structure collapses rapidly. So the answer is option A. So many aspirants start substituting variables, but system thinker notice that A plus B plus C plus D and A plus C immediately isolate B plus D. The moment B plus D becomes visible, the rest of the structure collapses rapidly. Comes to the question number 33, ranking constraint exclusions. Please look at the question number 33. It belongs to ranking constraint exclusions. This is not a ranking problem. It is a constraint elimination problem. Ranks 1 and 4 are already occupied. The remaining positions become a closed system. By testing the two conditional statements, both collapse under structural contradiction. So the answer is option D. Comes to the question number 35. It belongs to vehicle distribution matrix. Vehicle distribution matrix. Most students attempt arbitrary allocations. A system thinker first locks capacity. Car X equal to 3, car Y equal to 2. Therefore, car Z equal to 2. Once capacity are fixed, the remaining assignments become forced. So look at Look at the irony here. Have to lock the capacity first of all. Once capacities are fixed, the remaining assignments become forced. After observing these questions and doing these questions, what should be the family insight here is the examiner was not testing arrangements here. The examiner was testing whether you could operate inside constrained systems or not. This entire family belongs to what we call constraint architecture. So this is regarding about family A, that is family A, that is variable cluster and constraint architectures. We are moving to family B, that is logical implication architectures. This is also called as questions built around logic chains, that is logical implication architectures. Those questions belong to those questions built around logic chains. Please look at the question number 36 and question number 48 from set A paper. This family tests formal reasoning, not intuition, not common sense, only logic. Look at the question number 36. It belongs to contra positive tracking. Contra positive tracking. What is this here is most candidates read implications. A systems thinker reads contra positives. What is contra positives? If W implies not X, then X implies not W. So the single shift unlocks the entire question. If W implies not X, then X implies not W. So that single shift unlocks the entire question. So answer is option A. Then comes to the question number 48. This is belongs to syllogistic containment. Look at the question number 48. Red inside blue, blue inside green, green inside yellow. Once the containment structure is visible, every statement becomes mechanically verifiable. Once the containment structure is visible, every statement becomes mechanically verifiable. So the option D is the answer. Comes to this family insight, UPSC is increasingly rewarding implication tracking over intuitive guessing. So we are moving to family C, that is relational mapping architecture. This is also known as questions built around relationships. Relation mapping. Look at the question number 44, relational mapping question. This appears to be a family tree question, but it is not. It is a gender locking system. The moment S is identified as female and married to R, the gender structure becomes fixed. So every remaining relationship emerges automatically. When the moment S is identified as female and married to R, so the gender structure becomes fixed. Every remaining relationship emerges automatically. So it is belongs to gender locking system. So what is the family insight here is the examiner is testing relational mapping, not family trees. Relational mapping. When it tests in the relational mapping, when identify the gender, then automatically answer will evolve. not family trees. It is testing relational mapping. This is all about family C. Comes to the family D, that is spatial tracking architectures. What is spatial tracking architectures? Questions built around position and movement. When questions built around position and movement, it is called as spatial tracking architectures. Look at the question number 14 and question number 56. One appears to be a seating arrangement, but another appears to be a direction problem. But both belong to the same architecture. What is that architecture? Spatial tracking architecture. Look at the question number 14, circular geometry. Circular geometry. The key insight is not seating here. The key insight is symmetry. Opposite seats created fixed geometric anchors. So option C is the answer. Circular geometry. When comes to the circular geometry, when deals with the circular geometry question, the key insight is not seating. The key insight is symmetry. When the opposite seats created fixed geometric anchors. That is the underlying technique here. Question number 56, that is coordinate mapping. When comes to the coordinate mapping question, most students draw arrows, but a system thinker draws coordinates. Once plotted on a Cartesian grid, the answer becomes obvious. So you have to think as systems thinker, draws coordinates, and answer will evolve. So the option D is the answer. So you have to understand the underlying system. Then you can easily learn how to deal with that question. Comes to the family insight of spatial tracking architectures. The examiner is testing here spatial literacy, not a directional tricks. Symmetry and coordinates here. That is important as far as spatial literacy family is concerned. Moving to family E, this is coding and transformation architectures. What is coding and transformation architectures? These questions built around hidden patterns. What are the hidden patterns? Look at the question number 67. What is the question here is, most candidates memorize coding shortcuts, but a systems thinker searches for transformation rules. The pattern alternates here, +1, -1, then +1, -1. Once the transformation rule is identified, the actual letters become secondary because apply the same architecture. So the here option B is the answer. So it follows the pattern alternates like that. Coding and transformation family inside here is, the examiner is testing pattern extraction, not memorization. What is pattern here? That is the hidden pattern. What is hidden pattern here? That is the important thing you have to extract rather than memorization. Here examiner testing pattern extraction, not memorization. So once you search transformation rule, once you identify the transformation rule, the pattern alternates, pattern follow. Once the transformation rule is identified, the actual letters become secondary. The letters may be changed, but the pattern is the same, like +1 minus +1 minus 1 +1 minus 1. That is the actual transformation rule here. Apply the same structure. So after the Observation of these all questions of 2020 CSAT, 2026 CSAT logical reasoning section, what we observed is, what we noticed that, notice what just happened. Question 8 looked different from question 35. Question 36 looked different from question 48. Question 14 looked different from question 56. Question 44 looked different from question number 67. But underneath the surface, the examiner was repeating the same reasoning architectures. This is the big revelation here. Different questions, same architecture. This is the crucial strategic insight here. Comes to the, whether it comes to the constraints, whether it comes to the implications, whether it comes to the relational mapping, whether it comes to the transformation, whether it comes to the spatial tracking. Different questions, same architectures. But underneath the surface, the examiner repeating the same reasoning architectures. That is the pattern. That is the shift. And that is why UPSC does not repeat questions. UPSC repeats architectures. This is the way of an UPSC aspirant is thinking. Come to the 2027 roadmap from the 2026 lessons. From puzzle solving to architecture recognition, we have to move from puzzle solving to architecture recognition. So where does this leave you for 2027? If your preparation strategy is still built around memorizing hundreds of arrangement types, coding tricks, and elimination shortcuts, you are preparing for paper that no longer exists. The 2026 paper delivered a very clear message here. UPSC is increasingly rewarding architecture recognition over puzzle familiarity. Earlier, students solved questions. UPSC now expects you to recognize question families rather than solving questions. Build a question family notebook. Most students maintain notebooks filled with solved questions. That is useful. But for 2027, I want you to do something different. Build an architecture repository. That is also called as question family notebook. Start maintaining a question family notebook. Every time you solve a reasoning question, don't just write the answer. Ask yourselves, is this a question built around restrictions? Is this a question built around logic chains? Is this question built around relationships? Is this a question built around position and movement? Is this a question built around hidden patterns? Because questions change, but question families repeat. And those recurring question families are what we call architectures. At Metis, we call this an architecture repository. The name is not important here, the habit is important. Train yourself to identify the family before solving the question. That is where real improvement begins. Because questions change, architectures repeat, deconstruction practice. Take a reasoning question and remove its story. Remove the names, remove the family members, remove the vehicles, remove the directions. What remains? You observe. That is the underlying system. If you cannot identify the underlying system, you have not fully understood the question family cluster training. Do not practice reasoning one question at a time. Practice by architecture. Solve 5 implication questions together. Solve 5 relational mapping questions together. Solve 5 spatial tracking questions together. Your brain must stop searching for tricks and start recognizing patterns. That is how architecture recognition develops. The real upgrade. Most aspirants try to memorize the library. The successful aspirant learns how the architecture designs the building, like how the architect designs the building. That is the difference. The 2026 logical reasoning paper was not a collection of puzzles. It was a collection of cognitive filters. The examiner increased the surface complexity, but beneath the complexity, the same reasoning architectures appeared again and again. Those are variable constraints, logical implications, relational mapping, spatial tracking, pattern transformations, different questions, the same architecture. That is the UPSC has given us, and that signal matters. Because the future belongs to aspirants who can identify structure where others see confusion. The future belongs to aspirants who can recognize the patterns where others see randomness. The future belongs to aspirants who understand the UPSC is not merely testing answers, it is testing cognition. At Metis IAS, that is exactly what we are building, not question collectors, architect, architecture recognizers. The questions will change in 2027, but the architectures, no, they are already here. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next masterclass.